Hello, hello. Good afternoon. We are resuming the afternoon with a super exciting panel and series of talks about artificial intelligence and cancer diagnostics. And especially we will start with Professor Lamek Mbwaga, who is a teacher at the NUST. He's also working in machine learning and in different area of cancer, from biochemistry to genomics. And he will try to summarize and present what are the challenges and future direction of the field. Thank you very much.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Right, so as it has been explained already, I'll be trying to look at AI and genomics in Africa. We're trying to harness genetic diversity to transform cancer care. So the idea behind this talk is to look at what are some of the barriers we think we have across Africa and what can we do, what are some of the policy changes we can look into. This will tie in with most of what has been discussed here and what some of the presenters have already talked about, and what we are going to be discussing tomorrow in terms of the panel discussions. So you must have seen these slides before when you're talking about, I think Christian Happy spoke about this, when you're talking about Africa has the greatest, the genetic cradle for humankind, where we have the greatest genetic diversity. This goes without saying. And apart from that, we all know that as the population started moving out of Africa, then they started taking a subset of this genetic diversity. So Africa, of course, has an untapped potential when it comes to genetic diversity. And the use of AI will be able to give us a unique opportunity when it comes to analyzing or understanding this diversity in terms of making breakthroughs in precision medicine, novel disease insights, and of course, evolutionary understanding. So if you look at this slide, this is a paper which was published by Shikov some time back. It just shows the movement across Africa. And it leaves, you can actually see a few genetic footprints across Africa. So we are talking of, in terms of language, in terms of culture. There are some words which you use here in Southern Africa, but when you meet people from Western Africa, you use the same words. So this just shows you there's that movement across Africa. So this is another example of when it comes to African unique genetic sequences. So studies have identified novel variants, especially with the Khoisan genome. If you remember yesterday, when the ED was speaking about, let's say if something were to happen across, okay, just remove it. Let's say if there was supposed to be a catastrophic effect taking place across the whole world. So a good friend of mine called Musa Mshlanga was talking about this some time back. So let's say there's a big pandemic which has happened across the world, and we want to reboot the whole system. And then we go and press the button that is found in the corner of nowhere, hanging on nothing. So if we are to press on that button and restart everything else, then we can be able to come back especially to the Khoisan and be able to reboot the whole system back again. So that tells you the greatest diversity that we have across Africa, and of course with the genetic diversity with the Khoisans. And this is a good example which, with the Khoisan genomes, you can see that we have got roughly around 25% of the variants not found anywhere else across the world. So this just shows you another few examples. Apart from the Khoisan, you also have what Happy spoke about earlier in terms of lactase genome, where we have got various number of people who have got also these different types of genetic sequences. So if we were to look now at, in general, in terms of the Africa's current AI landscape, not talking about science, but just the landscape of Africa in terms of AI. So if you look at the digital infrastructure evolution, we find that Africa's technology is actually growing, right? Especially if you remember the time of COVID, we had very few genomic sequences or gene sequencing machines across board. And of course, with the help of Africa CDC and a number of countries who saw this as a priority, you see now across Africa, I think the Africa CDC was telling me you have got around 46 countries now having genomic sequences. So this is a good example. So if you look at mobile internet penetration, it has reached around 46% in 2022. looking at tech investment across Africa, we're talking about 4.8 billion. So this is what I remember Musa, you're talking about, Dr. Musa was talking about, how are we able to finance some of these things, right? So there are a number of activities that we can be able to do. So if you look at investment in hubs, Africa now hosts over 600 active tech hubs with Lagos, Nairobi, and of course Cape Town, which are known as emerging silicon savannas. So what is the status update when it comes to AI? It's the strength and unique opportunities. So we're looking at demographic divide. I remember during the panel session we just ended, Anshu raised a good point, and which is actually captured here, that 60% of the population is under 25. So this is a good human resource, especially when it comes to Africa. And then we have the opportunity of leapfrogging legacy systems. A good example is the M-Pesa in Nairobi or in Kenya, which has in a way been able to kind of do away with the traditional banking infrastructures. And of course, looking at indigenous innovations, things like ZD competition. So this already tells you when it comes to AI, we are doing something in Africa, right? So what seems to be the barriers then in that case when it comes to the issue of medical, when it comes to the issue of cancer genomics? What seems to be the barrier? We have actually touched some of this, and I'm hoping that tomorrow when we'll be talking about the way forward and what we want to see before the second Cancer Genomics Conference. What do you want to see? Within this 1 year, the next time when we meet again, what are we going to say? What have we achieved, right? Or is it just we're just going to meet here, have some good food, take some nice selfies, and then go home, come again, be kissed by the sun, and then come again and again and again? No. So what could be some of the key barriers that are preventing this progress? One of them is fragmentation. This was mentioned even earlier in the morning. We have got people doing the same research across people doing the same research, let's say in West Africa, in East Africa, in Southern Africa. That's even putting it much likely. We have got people doing the same research in the same country, or sometimes even in the same region, right? Let's say even here in Namibia, different universities, but doing similar research. Why can't we consolidate this instead of working in silos? So I think that's one of the key barriers. The other one I would say is infrastructural gaps. When you're talking about the issue of, because we know when you talk about genomics, cancer genomics, you're talking about investment. Of course, in cloud systems, investment in sequencing machines. So what we are planning, especially at NAST, yes, we are getting sequencing machines, but the plan is to work together with all the other institutions, not only universities, but also with the hospitals and everyone who is involved, different stakeholders. The other, of course, is the issue of training shortfalls. Africa CDC has run a lot in terms of training people, especially when it comes to bioinformatics. The same thing also with CSIR Pretoria. They are doing a lot of trainings when it comes to proteomics. They just had one recently. So even with RCG, so you have got, but still this is not enough. It's absolutely not enough. So if you can find ways in which you can be able to increase this when it comes to trainings, this would be a good thing. The other thing is also funding limitations. Why is funding limitations a big deal? Well, this was actually raised by Dr. Musa earlier, right? So if you look at when you find, it actually ties in with the fragmentation, where you find different small groups getting small fundings, so it becomes difficult to actually do work which is translational. Because if you have just a little bit of funding, this will be near impossible or even impossible to actually be able to do work that will then lead to translation or will then lead to proper drugs being developed. And finally, of course, there's the issue of ethical and regulatory challenges. They are quite weak. We have got very weak ethical challenges and regulatory challenges. So we need to come up with policies. So those are some, I would say, some of the 5 key barriers that I think are holding us back when it comes to progress. So without addressing these challenges, we remain isolated and unable to achieve what is actually required. Right, so this also ties in with various conventional diagnostics. I'm cognizant of the fact that we also have a number of suppliers here in the system as exhibitors and also as funders. So when it comes to diagnostics and therapeutics, the fact that we have underrepresented genetic databases, so most of this global research is heavily skewed towards European. We have also heard about this, European populations, so which may be less accurate to effective and effective for African individuals. So there's mixed opportunities for innovation, whereby Africa's unique variants could help discover new drugs. But in this case now, we should be precision medicine globally. Drug response and adverse effects, right? So this ties in with what I've just spoken about. So there's increased risk, and of course there's reduced efficacy to whatever drugs or whatever products that you're going to get, especially if you remember during the time of COVID, during it, with people talking about the vaccines. Some were saying, look, yeah, the vaccines could be working there with you, but in our case, yeah, they're not working. So could this be one of the reasons in terms of scarcity of reference genomes? So this is what I propose as a framework going forward, right? So having a Pan-African genomics network, this was actually raised earlier by Happy. I think he's not here. We were talking about setting up the GenCo, where the plan was, if those who are here in the morning, the plan was to have 10 centers of excellence, and then after that, the build up all the way to 30 centers of excellence across Africa. So if you can have collaborative biobanking infrastructure, standardized data collection, shared high-performance computing units. This was also raised by Vanessa, where she was talking about each country needs to be able to have its own data. But in her case, this is not possible. So that means everyone now who is working with her is forced to have the data stored in Australia, in the cloud system there. So having coordinated trainings, and then the issue of funding and policy innovations. If you can have multi-country research funding pools. So if we are able to, the way we are here now, if we're able to come up with a proposal or a system whereby we can decide, look, let's put our heads together and then decide to apply for a bigger grant. And then, so that would be a much easier way as opposed to going it solo. So the data sovereignty protection, of course, being able to work with various industry partners with equitable, of course, equity comes in, right? So these are some of the things that we have done, especially I normally sit in the microbiome task force for H3 Africa. So we actually did develop a microbiome research data toolkit, which can be used across, but when it comes to microbiome, is standardized. So this is a toolkit that is already there. It's freely available. Anyone who wants to work with research that deals with microbiome, they can easily be able to go online and use it, of course, using the REDCap software, which is also freely available. Right, so and you also were able to write a couple of papers talking about the same thing, consuming, but at this point in time, going out of this conference, after this conference, we'll be talking about being able to translate, because I think that's the message going forward, to be able to translate what you're doing. So that should be the message going forward. So with strategic investments, we should be able to provide solutions that are not just local challenges, but for global ones. We remember yesterday, especially when Professor Hayes was talking, okay, Vanessa, because I know she doesn't want to be called professor. Well, when Vanessa was talking about when they had to do looking at samples, and they had also to get samples from Australian, but so you can just validate so that nobody can say, okay, can we really trust this? So we have to come up with ways in which they can actually be translated and we can actually be relied upon when it comes to global ones. So we are able to solve these challenges with, of course, globally relevant solutions. So what are the next steps? The next steps, I think, is we need to align our efforts to ensure quality, scale, and pace. In terms of quality, I'm talking about standardized protocols, validated reference genomes, and of course, rigorous quality controls. That's why we have that toolkit available when it comes to microbiome studies. So we are able to come up with standardized protocols. In that toolkit, if you go, you'll find that you have got some drop-down buttons where you select which kit did you use, what did you use, what protocol did you follow. So it's very easy for us to be able to have standardized protocols. The next thing, of course, is scale. We should be able to have efforts across institutions and countries to achieve representative sampling. So that's the beauty. So there has to be quality, there has to be scale, and it has to be done at a much faster pace. There has to be a pace into it. Accelerated implementation. So we are trying to, as you have said in Africa, we are able to leapfrog what the fintech companies have been able to do. We should be able to also do the same. Right, so I'd like to, I think I'm within time, so I'd like to acknowledge the following, ICGB, of course, the Republic of Namibia, and my institution. Thank you very much.
Professor Lamek, for the insightful conference. Is there any questions? Okay. So thank you very much. We will definitely revisit this checklist during the conference. Now we are honored to welcome another Lamek, Lamek Mbangula Amugongo, and from Oshikati. And he has been working abroad for many prestigious organizations, now working for Boehringer Ingelheim. And he will talk about the use of AI and especially machine learning models for predicting risks in cancer prediction. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I hope you can all hear me in the room. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, great stuff, great stuff. Yeah, as the Chair has introduced me, my name is Lamek. I'm a computer scientist and I work for Boehringer Ingelheim, where I basically build AI models and try to use AI systems in the clinical workflow. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk about how do we harness AI and machine learning in genomic diversity to predict cancer risk in Africa, and just talking about some opportunities and challenges, but also then highlighting some of the work that I previously did. Okay, and just a disclaimer, because I work for Big Pharma, I'm just highlighting that whatever I say in this presentation mostly are solely just my views and do not necessarily reflect that of Boehringer Ingelheim. So, and in this presentation, I'm going to start with just a brief introduction and talk about AI in genomics, missing African data and the way forward, and give some concluding remarks. So, of course, many of you know that cancer incidences and mortality in Africa are on the rise, and cancer is increasingly becoming a major public health burden on the continent. And according to statistics, in 2022, it was about 820 new incidences of cancer and about 550,000 deaths from cancer. And the highest incidence from cancer on the continent are mostly breast cancer, cervical, followed by prostate. And also when you look at the high mortality, you then look at also the same type of cancer, cervical, breast, followed by prostate. And if we without any agent attention, it is also estimated, according to the Cancer Sub-Saharan Africa Lancet Oncology Commission, that these incidents are going to increase, and the deaths are also going to increase to about 1 million in 15 years' time by 2040, if nothing happens in terms of early detection and also personalized care. Timely cancer care is quite important because if we identify the disease early, we can then determine the right treatment course early on. But as we know that some of these early detection tools are not yet on the continent because, of course, some of them are expensive, but with the advent of new technologies such as AI and machine learning, we have actually a potential to actually support early cancer detection and also guide personalized care. And by doing this, we hope to actually improve patient outcomes. And there are actually a lot of AI tools that leverages on imaging to actually identify cancer cells from imaging. And these tools are becoming better and better every day. And in my previous work as well, when I was a PhD student at the University of Manchester, I was developing image-based data mining techniques that leverages on advanced analytics and prediction to actually look at how the tumor changes over time during radiotherapy treatment of lung cancer patients. And we found that there are actually these patterns that we can identify with advanced data mining and machine learning that it can actually support how we treat cancer patients, lung cancer patients. And here we are looking at visible tumor regression and trying to distinguish between elastic tumor regression and an inelastic tumor regression, whereby with elastic you see a visible tumor changing or shrinking, but the surrounding tissues are moving around, are moving along, meaning that there is nothing between the visible tumor and those tissues as during treatment. And in that case, it makes it better to actually to adapt treatment margins, because you can then focus on the tumor and reduce the exposure of radiation to the surrounding tissues. Whereas with an inelastic tumor shrinkage, we have a visible tumor that is shrinking over treatment, but the surrounding tissues are staying in the same places, meaning that there is something between the tumor and those surrounding tissues, which can be microscopic diseases. In that case, it's better not to change the treatment margin so that you can make sure that you don't miss any microscopic tumors. And these are really just some of the things that you can really do with it. And on this image, what you can see here, for example, it might seem that this tumor is becoming smaller over time, but it could also be because of other things, that necrosis that are happening in there. And when you then apply this advanced imaging analysis, you can actually then look what other things that are happening around the tumor. Whereas in the other one, you can see kind of like static, but you can also then see that other aspects of there are also other aspects that are kind of like more or less staying in the same places. So with this, it can provide additional information to oncologists so that they can find better ways to devise whether to change treatment margins or not. And a team from Stanford actually developed this tool called Chief. And Chief is a ChatGPT-like tool that actually leverages what you call prompting. You ask it by using natural language, and it leverages information both from let's say DNA information, but also imaging information, and then it's able to tell you whether they are, for example, cancer cells from lab data, but also from imaging. And they have actually shown that it's actually working better, and it's able to actually predict genetic mutations as well. Of course, up to now, I spoke about imaging, which is something that I'm passionate about, but also something that I've a lot of experience on. But imaging does not really provide us with cellular information about the tumor, about the cancer. So this where I think genomics comes in and can be very, very helpful. Genomic information already, of course, gives us this information about, about the function of an organism's genome, which we can actually leverage to improve our understanding of cancer molecular biology. But the biggest challenge is that although we can use this information to transform cancer care assessment, but the biggest challenge is really how do you analyze this data, because it comes in large quantity. And I think here that's where AI really can play a role, because with artificial intelligence, we can actually develop models that are able to identify patterns in large data sets and be able to actually identify trends. And there are already some people in the field who are looking at this. For example, one of the uh, challenge is how do you, for example, do this variant genetic calling? It's a big challenge, but these guys, Poplin and colleagues, were able to actually identify billions of short and error, be able to do this from short and errorful sequence reads, and they were actually able to validate this, and so the benefit of actually automating this generalized method of variant calling, which really just shows the potential of AI in analyzing large data sets. And in another study, you have Park Lee and Nam, who were trying to repurpose drugs, and they then used machine learning to be able to see which drug can be used for which treatment. And they found that these models were actually quite good at using gene expression, and they showed that improved patient-specific therapy and recommendations was quite helpful. And I think for me, the biggest win for AI in medicine or in biology is what you call AlphaFold. And this one thing that Google made. And here with AlphaFold, we are actually able to predict protein structures. And as we know, proteins are the basic building block of life. And if you are able to predict a protein structure, we can actually then be able to personalize care, because most viruses come in a form of, mutation in cells. And if you are able to find the right protein structure that can bind on on a mutating cell, you can then be able either to stop the cell development by inhibiting it, or which can then slow, for example, progress of the condition, or you are able to kind of like also amplify, for example, cell reproduction. And this, I think, and it also won the Nobel Peace Prize for physics and chemistry this last year. So this is really one of the biggest potential where we are seeing artificial intelligence being used in biology and chemistry. So imaging allows us to see inside the body without opening the patient, whereas genomic data provide us with a complete encoding of about these organisms' DNA. So meaning the structure, how they functions, and then so the interaction of genes. So if you are to combine imaging and omics data, I think there is really potential there to really personalize, but also enable discovery of new biomarkers. And these new biomarkers can be helpful for precision predictions of patient prognosis, for example. And we are already seeing some papers and also some studies that are actually trying to leverage omics data, but also imaging to in different cancers, such as, for example, here in gliomas. And these models are showing to be quite good at predicting this risk. And also in another study, there are also colleagues that have shown combining these to imaging, but also omics data. But the biggest challenge is that most of this work is done in the Western world where I'm based. But we are actually missing one thing, which is really African data. And while Africa makes up, of course, about 25% of the world's population with its diversity, only 3% of global genomic data is made up of Africans. And there are actually some efforts, like from Roche, which is another pharma, who have actually invested in a project called Africa Cancer Atlas. And this is really important because for us to develop effective AI and machine learning models, we need diverse data sets. If the data is not diverse, we'll have models that work for one set of the population and may not necessarily work in Africa. And there is a study, or there is a group on the continent who is working with Roche. It's a company it's a biotechnology company based in Ghana. They're working with Roche and they're trying to collect about genomic and also clinical data of about 7,500 patients with diverse cancers. Of course, this is a start, but given the data from the genome project, I think this is just it's a drop in the ocean. So we need more and more of genomic and clinical data from the continent. So we need more and more of these initiatives to build contextualized AI models, because otherwise we'll have AI models that are able to work well on Caucasian white male patients, which is mostly found, is the data found in the Western world, but will not necessarily be able to translate to African patients. So my view of somebody who worked as an academic, but also as a technologist on the continent, but also now with a different angle working in the West, I think this is what we need to do, is to think about three aspects, which is data, technology, and capacity building. Because for us to be able to leverage AI and machine learning on African genomic data, we need to have diverse and large quantity of African genome data, not just of 200 patients. We need more patients for us to be able to say this data is representative. But of course, like my namesake spoke earlier, I spoke about data harmonization, but I even say that we need to go beyond data harmonization by creating really proper standards that all those that are contributing can adhere to, but also good data governance frameworks. And for us that work, especially in critical sectors such as health, proper data governance is key. And also we need to also know that AI is expensive, so we need infrastructure to be able to not only store, but also compute, because if you have genomic data that's so large, for you to be able to process it, you can't process it on your on your computer. And I know the VC spoke about the spoke about this high performance computing. To a certain extent, I think we need more than high performance computing for able to do this. Of course, this is a start, but we need more. And we really have to also think about empower youth with the right skills. And somebody who has been in this field for quite some time, it's very, very technical. So you really need to we really need to think about investing in the people with the right technical skills. And of course, we can't just keep on talking and waiting and for another conference. We need to become practical and really try to really build tools that are contextualized to our own use cases. And just to conclude, I'll conclude by saying that our representation matters. African genomic diversity is really essential if we really want to build generalizable AI models that can work on the continent. And with the right data, we are really able to leverage this machine learning to transform cancer care by having these early detection models, but we also have to think about how do we leverage some of these models in our own setting. For example, somebody who is in Rundu, somebody who is in Ndola, in a clinic, are you able to have an expert at the at the BMA cancer ward in Windhoek that is just engaging with a nurse or a radiologist or somebody who is not an expert in this clinic, but they are using an AI tool for a low resource setting to advise. And these are really some of the things that we can do as opposed to always having all the patients travel to Windhoek. And another challenge is that we have to invest in the infrastructure, like I said, for these, not only storage, but compute, because You can have data, but if that data is not processed into meaningful insight, it's meaningless. And also, I will emphasize again, capacity building is non-negotiable. And in Africa, we love to talk and talk, but not do anything. So we really have to do, because here there's nothing we can achieve if we don't build. We have to build the tools. And lastly, really think about this collaboration with purpose. How do we collaborate for impact? How do we have this broader collaboration between government, academia, and industry to really bridge the gaps, but also to get things done? Thank you very much. And yeah, if there's any questions, I'm available for some.
Thank you very much, Lamek. Very interesting. I was thinking about hiring you for GeneGebra, but we can maybe talk after that. Is there any question regarding the work of Lamek? Lamek, one question. You are working for a very prominent private company who has been making millions selling clear-cut diagnostic results. How do they feel and behave regarding now selling products where the only output is a prediction, a risk estimation, and AI model?
Yeah, so it's a very important question. But of course, for us, we make medicine. Boehringer makes medicine. That's our product, and we try to leverage all these tools in an ethical and responsible ways to support our clinical workflows. And that's why we have people like me in the company who are not necessarily maybe medical doctors, but have some background, but also good scientific skills to support what we do, the drug development process. So, and of course now it's actually quite good because we have, for example, the EU AI Act, which also kind of like guide, but we also have the FDA and EMA coming up with with what you call guideline documents to actually guide how we should actually use AI in biologics and drug development process. So we try to follow that, but also internally as a company, we try to have good ethical standards and really set up, AI ethics, because for whatever we do, we are trying to we are trying to develop products for patients. We need to make sure that we use AI systems and in a responsible way.
Thank you very much. I think I would like, yep, sorry.
Okay, thank you very much, Lamek. I just wanted to ask, maybe not maybe much related to what you say, but now since you are working for the company that are involved in drug development, in your discussion, when you are having discussion with them, what is their appetite when it's coming to doing maybe clinical trials in Africa on the continent itself, rather than just getting some few Africans in the Western world? What is their appetite, or what is their challenge to come and do clinical trials so that they can develop drugs that that were done, the clinical trials were done with much inclusivity of African population, since the target is always African. We have the disease, but the clinical trials are not often done in Africa. Thank you.
That's a question about my pay grade, but I'm going to answer it this way. So of course, companies want to develop drugs for everyone, but one thing that you have to also think about is that to develop one drug, it costs $2.8 billion just to get one drug from discovery to market. And that does not mean that it's going to be successful or not. So, and every company wants to go where the people are and make sure that you have trials everywhere. But from a commercial point of view, sometimes it's quite difficult because you have to work also with different partners. So what and I think on a personal note, and also somebody from Africa, it's really a challenge to get big pharma to actually do, let's say, focus on, for example, diseases on the African continent. Let's say, for example, malaria, because though it affects a big population, they also is designated, let's say, for example, as an orphan disease, meaning that it's a disease that it affects a lot of people, but those people may not necessarily be able to pay for it. So, of course, we need that a little bit paradigm shift in this for us to be able, but I think this can only come from us in the continent to be able to say, okay, why don't we also invest, all of us countries on the continent and in the sub-Saharan, but also in the global south that are affected by these diseases. Why don't we bring resources together and our scientists that are all over the world so that they can come help us develop drugs for these specific things? Because the priorities will always differ, because of course, like, why will somebody spend 2.8 billion to create a drug for if they're not going to make the 2.8 billion back? So they would rather make drugs like blockbuster drugs that are selling like for weight loss, because they know they are going to make their money back. So it's really something that requires us as Africans to think and really think, not only look at what we get from the global north, but really think about how do we leverage, especially with smaller biotech companies, to focus on drugs or therapeutics that are focused on conditions that are on the continent.
Thank you, Lamek. Yeah, I think we will just switch to the next speaker and maybe collect the question afterward, okay? Thank you very much, Lamek. We are glad to call on stage now Elena Musau from Kenya. She's the head of oncology at Kenyatta University, and she will talk about the use of AI for early cancer screening. She's a distinguished guest with many honors, and she has received recently the Leadership Award in Oncology. Elena, please, you're welcome.
Hello, good afternoon. So, yeah. I'll have many disclaimers this afternoon. I am not an AI expert, but I am an oncologist, so I work with a lot of cancer patients, and I've been working with our Ministry of Health to develop the cancer policy, the cancer treatment guidelines, the cancer screening guidelines, and many, many other guidelines. A lot of our guidelines were focused mostly on treatment, but we were also looking in terms of prevention and the importance of cancer screening, given that we see a lot of our cancers late. Not necessarily to prevent cancers, but for early detection, because early detection does save lives. So I have nothing to disclose other than I'm not an AI expert, and I'm also not a marathon runner. Yes, I am Kenyan, and many times, we're wondering, are we poised enough to be able to use AI to advance cancer screening, cancer detection, cancer treatments? But there's a lot, and you've heard all about the infrastructure that we need, and is it possible to be able to do this in our clinic setting? So in Kenya, we do work with colleagues from the Western world, and we're able to see some improvements in terms of cancer screening, but is it something that we can carry out across the board in the country? We've looked at the data a lot over the last 2 days, and what we do know is that in Africa, we are seeing a lot of late diagnosis of cancer. Many of our patients are still presenting with stage 3 and 4, very few with stage 1 and 2. I want to tell you, I was working in a rural facility that is 4 hours from the capital city of Nairobi, and we had increased efforts at cancer screening. And we used to run monthly camps in the different sub-counties within that county. And I actually did see stage 1 breast cancer in that rural village. And it's not that we can't do it even in a rural setting. We can. It's just our efforts to screen are not great. Our population does not understand what cancer screening is. Our population does not go to hospital unless they have symptoms, signs and symptoms. And this has a lot to do with health financing as well. So the challenges that we see across board when we're looking at just conventional cancer screening would be infrastructure and the resource limitations that we have. Our facilities are very far between the different homesteads that are there. They sometimes don't even have staff, let alone medications. So stockouts are a real thing. We also have inadequate cancer registries. If we're trying to plan for these facilities, we are not able to because we don't know how many people in that region might have cancer. Then, of course, the biggest things, finances. We always talk about finances, but also policies. The government can't plan for something that they do not know about. So if there's policies in place and they're able to say there's a document that leads us to look into this area, and so we can be able to give health financing for it. The high costs of cancer screening, it's unfortunate that, HPV screening for, say, cervical cancer is still quite costly. We can still do visual inspection, but even better is to be able to identify the patients who would be at risk to developing, say, cervical cancer through HPV screening. And then, of course, lack of insurance coverage or lack of social health financing in many of our countries to be able to cater to cancer screening. Then the awareness and the cultural factors, as I've nuanced before, that will lead to the late presentations. But the truth is many of our people are scared of the word cancer because the minute they hear a diagnosis of cancer, they equate that to death. We don't have many of our survivors coming out and giving positive stories of treatment and survivorship. Systemic and strategic gaps that we have within our healthcare systems and the poor prioritization that we see. We also don't have a lot of research in terms of the innovative ways in which we could be leveraging early detection through screening. And then the data gaps that we have. We are largely manual-based, paper-based facilities. Very few of our facilities have electronic medical records. And even when you have an electronic system, whatever you put in might not be what is needed to be able to capture the data that we require. So a lot needs to go into addressing these data gaps. But we do have some efforts. It's not all doom and gloom in this continent. There's a lot of cancer awareness campaigns, so everyone knows about cancer nowadays. Before we used to talk about HIV quite a lot, and it was either you're infected or affected. And it's sort of the same thing with cancer now. It's either that you know somebody who has it, or you know about it, or you can name a homestead that has it within your village. So there's a lot of awareness going on, but that doesn't always translate to early detection. There's a lot of use of mobile health, and this was championed again with the COVID-19 pandemic that we saw. And so the epidemic of cancer can also be using mobile health or telemedicine, telehealth, to be able to get cancer screening going. And then training and infrastructure, we need to build capacity in the area of cancer screening, but we can also do this through e-learning. And then we have national cancer registries in the different countries. We have good papers. They don't always translate to action, but most of our countries, we have good national cancer policies. We have very good national cancer control strategies, including the screening programs and screening guidelines, but we don't have good registries to be able to say how many patients we've screened. And so are we then poised to use AI to look at early cancer screening? So we need to have the machine learning, the deep learning, where we are looking at the convoluted networks to be able to analyze, say, if it's screening for breast cancer, the different mammograms, to be able to see the different chest X-rays, to be able to identify patients who are likely to have lung cancer and not TB. And even for now genomics, when we're looking at the different biomarkers, and also for screening for different cancers that we could use biomarkers for. And the benefits that we would see with AI screening would be the high detection rates, reduced false positives, and then predicting risk, hopefully, for patients who would be at risk of developing cancer. We can utilize, innovations that are good for African population. We always say we have a high mobile penetrance. And it's true in many of the African countries now, the mobile, even in the village, you know, the kids don't know that you pick up a phone like this. They know that you talk like this, you know. We do see a lot of mobile penetrance. But not many of these phones are actually not smartphones. And so how can we be able to use USSD codes instead of apps to be able to look at cancer screening or sending cancer screening messages or health messages for our population? And then we can be able to bridge, geographical gaps, even in areas that are hard to reach, maybe due to wars or famine, and be able to do screening in such areas. And the outcome will be early detection and, of course, improved outcomes for our continent. The data is there, and it's a lot, even within the continent. Not too much in the continent, but out there in the Western world, there's a lot of data, not just looking at the common malignancies, but even some that we don't always screen for. But it's just a snapshot of, some of the metrics that they look for: reducing the rate of false negatives, looking at the accuracy and sensitivity, looking at early detection accuracy, detection rates, prognostication for the cancers that they have. And the impact that they see is that definitely AI does have a huge role to be able to get patients, in the early stages of cancer. So some of the examples that we have from Kenya, we have a point-of-care AI cytology clinic in different rural settings. There was one that was done in Mombasa, where they were able to do pap smears, and the lab technologists would be able to stain and upload the images onto, using their phones, onto an app, and would get colleagues from Norway to be able to look at them and be able to tell us whether those were patients with, malignant lesions or patients who had got dysplasias. And, it reduced 30% of the errors that we were able to see, and they were also using a pathologist who was about 50 kilometers away to be able to assist them. Then there's one for breast cancer that was being done in a city a town that is about, say, 60 kilometers from Nairobi, looking at, detecting breast cancer through the mammograms, so the risk prediction, and it's working well so far. They have not yet fully published that data, but it's integrating with our policies. The other thing that we've learned is if you're able to say that this is going to improve the lives of Kenyans and quote the cancer policy, then you can also get some assistance from the Social Health Insurance Fund to be able to help the patients get to you. But most of these initiatives have been in isolated areas, so not the deep rural area. It's always in a town or a city. And so there is bias when we're looking at the patients that have been sampled by these technologies. In Africa, we also have initiatives to be able to screen for cancers. Most of them are cervical cancer and breast cancer, but we do have also some for lung cancer. And there's an app from Ghana that's in different countries now that is looking at also colorectal cancer screening through endoscopy. And we are getting good data for that as well. So the challenges that we see, and this is not new, you've been hearing it over and over and over this afternoon, the data quality and availability. So underreporting and incomplete records. As I've said, most of our records are paper-based, and so you're not able to get full information even if you want to go back and do a retrospective review, because we do have the images sometimes, and we do have the information on these patients, but if you can't input it into the machine, the computer, to be able to use or model to be able to get data that was helpful for cancer screening, it becomes quite a challenge. And then underrepresentation of African populations in the training data that we have, because many of these apps and algorithms are not developed for the African population. And so we do see some biases and reduced accuracy. But you see with the machine, the more you feed it, the more it learns and the better it is at predicting. So we just need to keep giving the data, keep sharing that data as well. Infrastructure and access, again, we can see bias here that is hindering AI deployment. So in the rural areas vis-a-vis the urban areas, so there'll be more uptake in the urban areas than the rural areas when we're looking at cancer screening. And even the socioeconomic divide, those that are able to have access to computers, electricity, mobile phones might tend to be served better than those that do not. The ethical regulation and equity issues that we see when we are talking about AI are not, cancer screening is also not saved from these. So there's the issues of data privacy. What happens with our data? Same thing with genomics. So we send our specimens sometimes out of the country to India, to the US. Do our patients know that that data is going to those areas? Have they given consent for what could happen to their genes as soon as they leave the country? And then, the same thing in terms of social-cultural misalignments there. Workforce and integration, we don't have enough workforce. We can spend a whole year talking about that. I don't know if it's really going to change, but how can we build capacity and be able to integrate AI into this capacity that we've been building over the years? And then also the technological and clinical validation to be able to ensure that what we are working with and the algorithms that we are giving are able to capture the diverse heterogeneity that is within the African continent. Some of the solutions or some of the things that we could leverage on to be able to ensure that as we adopt AI, it works for us is to build Africa-specific databases via collaborations. A lot of the data that we've been talking about today, the GloboCan data from the International Agency of Research in Cancer, is from registries within the countries. I'll speak for Kenya. That data is definitely shy of the truth. It's probably underreported, that's for sure. They get data from the Nairobi Cancer Registry and the Eldoret Cancer Registry. We do not have a population-based registry in the country. We also have patients that we are not able to diagnose with cancer. We just make clinical suspicions that they have cancer. And this is all to do with finances. So if we're able to build specific data sets for our countries and be able to ensure that our governments understand the importance of this, then we can be able to get the data that we require to model our AI tools on. And then we need to develop offline tools as well. Not everything needs to be online because we don't always have access to very good internet. And then low-cost mobile AI tools. Instead of using apps, if we could also be able to use USSD codes to get some of the data that we are looking for. Decentralization of our clinics for screening to be able to also utilize telehealth to be able to do this. Regulations regarding AI within our different government bodies and agencies. In Kenya, we have now got the Digital Health Authority that is going to be able to guide us as we do this electronic-based treatments and screenings. And then we could be able to engage the communities to ensure that those that are at risk are not left behind. Capacity building across the countries, public-private partnerships. We need to know that we cannot walk alone. We must all work together, and it's all for the good of the continent. And then we need to be able to incorporate explainable AI. It can't be about one thing. We need to be able to do multi-models, combining imaging with biomarkers, with genomics, so that we can get the data sooner rather than later to be able to get better outcomes for the cancer patients. And then run prospective trials in high-burden areas. We have pockets of disease. In Africa, we have what is known as the esophageal cancer belt. And we know the areas where the incidences are high. Why haven't we looked at it? Why is it only in that belt? Why not the rest of the continent? And things like that. So we could be able to run prospective trials to look there and see if there are things or information that we could find to be able to detect cancer or even to be able to understand those at risk of developing different cancers. So whilst AI may not be the silver bullet in terms of cancer screening. We will still be forced to continue with our clinical breast exams, with our mammograms, with our pap smears, with our visual inspection of the cervix, etc. It can be used for precision at the end of the day, but we will be needing to prioritize local innovation for what suits us within the continent. We need to have policies and framework for the AI cancer screening, and we need to have multi-stakeholder collaboration to be able to do this. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Dr. Musau. Are there any questions? Okay. Let's move now to the next talk given by a citizen of the world, serial entrepreneur, Chief Technology Officer at Oncotech, and CEO and Chairman of the Board of Pearl Dia Group. He will share his experience and views about AI and how to create value in the cancer arena. Thank you very much, Brian.
Wow. Good afternoon, all. It's such an honor to be among such brilliant minds. I'm not a PhD, this is my disclaimer, or a doctor. We work on implementing the great stuff that you guys discover and create. So at Oncotech, we have created a number of technologies and initiatives for solving the entire value chain problem in cancer. So from early detection to getting therapies to the actual ground. So that's where we are. So I don't want to repeat the statistics that everybody, well, a lot of people have already spoke about, but these are the numbers these are numbers with which we are working on, okay? But I wanted to focus here though, that's from cervical cancer by age. And if you look at the actual image there, you see Africa has a very high risk problem. I'll skip that. The other critical point to also look at is where is Africa's survival rate comparative to developed nations. So you look at breast cancer in developed countries is 90%, whereas in Africa as a continent is 40%. In cervical cancer, 75% versus 35. In prostate cancers, it's 95 versus 50. So the early detection is a critical component. And we all know how much lives can be saved or quality of life can be created with early detection. So we have created a suite of products in order to handle this problem. So at Afterscan, it's a cost-effective, accessible, and mobile cancer screening solution. At SenseMate, we are doing improved diagnostic image analysis. There is now AI-empowered surgical robots as well, AI-enabled therapeutics development, and the OncoCare Alliance is the AI-empowered research. So I will speak about each of those. Regular benefits of regular screening, you guys are the experts, you already know this. Mass population screening. So what's the problem with mass population screening? Number one, affordability. Number two, portable technologies. And number three, the infrastructure to be able to, the logistical infrastructure to be able to do this. So with Afterscan, our technology, we are able to detect breast, lung, prostate, uterine, and cervical cancer. We have a proprietary headset that you see in the image there, and we have some samples in the hallway as well. We use Samsung devices to actually take the photos of the person's eyes in a very particular way. And then we use machine vision and machine learning to identify certain biomarkers that are indicative of cancer. We have clinically trialed this in Europe, so we are Swedish. This technology was developed in Sweden. We are a Swedish company. We've clinically trialed this in Europe, and we have received our CE mark class 1 as a medical device. At SenseMate, we are developing image analysis technologies that are cost effective. Okay, that's what we're doing there. And many of you spoke about this, including the last speaker. So we are trying to create this in a way that is inclusive and accessible. AI-powered surgical robots. So we are working with several companies from Korea and Japan who bring the components. However, we are providing the data to be able to do surgical robotic surgeries in low-income countries, because this is a very expensive solution right now, and even in developed countries, these are only being introduced now. So we are trying to get ahead of that curve so that we can solve some of the problems that Helena spoke about, which is low-income countries not having access to the care and technologies that are available in developed countries. Azure is the other one. This is another device that we have created along with the software itself. So what we've done is worked with Victoria University in Canada to actually develop the technology to be able to do this specific type of imaging, and then providing this as a service to others. So if you are conducting a research and you need to do this, instead of having to spend tens of millions of dollars to buy the equipment, we can connect you guys to be able to work together, and they will provide it as a service. These are some of the capabilities of the Azure technology. We got optical cardiograms, automated laser ablation, and etc. This is the critical one that I wanted to really talk to you guys about today. Many of you spoke about being able to create the lack of technology, the lack of infrastructure. Professor Lamack spoke about doing multi-country research. There's a lot of redundancies in research, if you will, right? And then also access to funding. So, and another statistics, if you will, Africa represents 18% of the global population, yet less than 1% of the training data for healthcare AI, okay? South Asia and Africa combined is 42% of the global population, yet less than 5% of the AI training data, right? Global South as a whole represents 70% of the global population and less than 10% of the healthcare training data. So we decided, let's try to fix this problem. So we created OncoCare Alliance. So OncoCare Alliance has 3 components to it. One is the collaboration hub. So the point of the collaboration hub is to bring researchers, scientists, physicians, and technologists together in one group. So it's kind of like LinkedIn, but specifically for this purpose. And every member on here are verified members. So unlike LinkedIn, you can't just sign in as a public. You have to go through an application process and be verified, and then only you're entered in as a member. So we want to make sure we keep this as a tight-knit, quality group. The second is the AI tools and APIs. So one of the speakers said how expensive it is. So what we have done is created a marketplace whereby we've taken like SenseMate, our technologies, and other AI technology creators, and brought them onto the platform and created a model whereby you can now, it's called the utility model, but you can now rent their services. So you don't need to develop the entire technology stack. You don't need to go find expertise in programming and AI engineers. You can just use their services to do your research project. The third is the comprehensive data. So again and again and again, we've heard yesterday and today that the lack of data or representation, okay? So we are fixing that problem by working with, this is the collaboration hub, the AI tools and APIs. There's another one that's important. The genomic data. So one of the examples of AI technologies we've created is edge computing for genomic sequencing, right? So one of the challenges is genome data is huge. It takes forever to upload that to the cloud. We've seen instances where that has taken months. So we have created a technology where we can take the, what is it called, the analog information, convert it to digital, and then process it at the edge of the network, still using cloud computing. So this is currently being used at Harvard, at Stanford, at Florida University, I think Cambridge. So these are technologies that are currently in existence and being utilized in developed countries. And we made it cost effective so that it can be accessible for the global south as well. Comprehensive medical data. In addition to the data that we are collecting through our screening on the ground, we are working with medical care, healthcare providers, so these are clinics and hospitals, as well as folks like you, researchers, to be able to put your data on a blockchain. Okay? So once it's on the blockchain, we will help you monetize your data. So if, let's say, a pharmaceutical company wants to use it, or another researcher wants to use it, or another AI development company wants to use that data, it's on the blockchain, and they don't get access to the actual data itself. What they get access to is the information through APIs. Okay? And I'll give you some real-life examples. But you, as the data originator, get 50% of that transaction. So we are trying to we're trying to fix the problem: one, lack of data; two, helping people who have data to be able to monetize it. And there's but also to add to that, I know there's ethical use concerns and data privacy and such. So we actually take on the responsibility of anonymizing the data, de-identifying the data, and structuring the data as well. And we're also in the process of implementing an independent ethics committee who's oversee the whole process, so nobody can abuse it. So who can access this data? It's academic research institutions, public health organizations, biotech and pharmaceutical companies, global NGOs. That's our whole ecosystem. This is our work in action. I wanted to actually talk about this. So it's not just all technologies and theories. So from left to right, so the first two pictures are in Sri Lanka. The third and fourth is in Uganda, and then the fifth and sixth is in DRC. And these are just some examples of what we are doing. So we got the technology, we partnered up with other screening solutions providers as well, and do what is called medical camp. So these are mobile medical camps. So we go into rural areas, we screen the people, and when they come back positive, we are working with NGOs and Christian church groups to be able to fund their care, right? There's no point in screening them and then you just say, sorry, you're sick, and get out, right? So they fund the immediate need for care, okay? We take that data, we anonymize it, de-identify it, build a model, and we are working with, just to name a couple, the likes of Gates Foundation, Buffett Foundation, another UK-based group, MedAid UK, to build then healthcare capacity. Because with the screening data, we can go back to these organizations and say, look, in this region, this is the health exposure. Therefore, and the nearest care facility is 400 kilometers away, right? And that's a death sentence for some people in these villages because all they got are bicycles and motorbikes, right? So we go to them and say, working with the government to actually build healthcare capacity in those regions. And those are real pictures. Thank you, that's it.
Thank you very much, Bren. Very interesting overview. Questions? Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. I've forgotten the saying, but still continue. So I have basically two questions pertaining to your whole, Onco Care, round program. So the first question, is tailored to your models that, you mentioned that there are pre-trained models available on your platform for people to purchase and use. So I would want to actually give quite a disclaimer that there are also pre-trained models that are available outside for people to use. I would want to ask, I want to give an example, that's from Hugging Face, that is available for, so I want to ask the first question that, what is the difference? Because those on Hugging Face are actually pre-trained from Google DeepMind and also big companies, but it's actually free out there for people to use. So what is quite the difference between what you're actually presenting out there and for people to purchase and what is also out there free for people to use? And the second question is actually tailored to your monetization and policy. So I want to actually ask pertaining to what privacy policy are you actually giving to your participants or users out there for people to, in uploading their data, for you to use? Are they safe? Are the data, could the data actually be acquired easily for people who are around there? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so for the first question, the difference is the source data. So we are working from Southeast Asia all the way to Chile, and from Russia to, South Africa. So, and we are predominantly focused on non-European countries. So Europe and North America is out, right? The rest of the world, if you will. So the models that are being made available, firstly, I want to make sure you got this right. So we at Oncotech or Oncocare Alliance, we don't necessarily develop the models, okay? These are models that are being developed by contributors to the network. So these could be, a university in Sri Lanka or a private researcher in let's say, Egypt, right? So they are the ones who are providing the model. So I don't have necessarily visibility to exactly how that model was developed. You can collaborate with them to get that understanding. But where we are focused, that we ensure, is that those models includes the Global South population data. So that's the difference, right? To answer your second question regarding privacy, as I had said, when we work with, let's say, medical data, we ensure at the edge, so before it even comes into the actual platform, at the edge, we ensure it's anonymized, de-identified, and structured. So the data that actually gets onto the platform is already de-identified and anonymized, right? So we don't have that risk because the identifiable information stays on premise. So it stays at the hospital.
Good afternoon, Doctor. Thank you very much for the amazing presentation on the impressive products Oncocare is providing. One thing about marketing experts is that they just give you bits of information, and they actually do this intentionally so that you then go inquire more privately, corner you, and then convince you. So, yesterday I indicated that I'm a number lady, and it would be very interesting to know even the rough estimate for the cost of the products to assess its accessibility, because you know we are limited resource settings, and we are more interested in numbers because it might be very good product, which is actually because of cost might not be accessible to our market yet. And then also the second one, it will be interesting to hear the comparison between the impact after you have introduced all the innovations versus what you found there. And then lastly, just to hear how Oncocare is collaborating with governments and academia in countries where they are operating to improve accessibility in terms of strategic and policy, really, what's the word? Yeah, policy engagements with those actors. Thank you.
That's a loaded question. All right, so to answer the first question, the cost is approximately $20 US for the entire screening, right? So it's per screen, and it's $20 US. So if you're, for females, that includes the lung, breast, cervical, ovarian, and uterine. For males is lungs and prostate, okay? The second question, so we'll give you an example. So in order to bring this product to Namibia, and we want to ensure our AI models are trained with Namibian population, we are partnered with NUST and Professor Lemack, and we are doing this clinical validation. So every country we go into, we do local validation, which is very different from the big medical device companies and big pharma, right? We are intentionally doing this because we want to ensure that our models are truly inclusive, right? So in doing that, we have developed relationships with governments and academia so that we are not necessarily prescribing solutions to the government, right? They are working with academic institutions in their own country with their own people to implement the policy that is right for them, okay? An example of this is in the Philippines, there's a huge upward trend in cervical cancer, especially in northern Philippines, in the rural areas. And women are just not showing up, right? Even when the symptoms become very severe, they're not showing up. And this is predominantly due to cultural stigma and lack of, let's say, information, right, or lack of education. So what we had done there is we worked with the public, the public sector as well as the private sector to implement a policy, and this is now live. You can actually go Google this. So the government came back and said all employer insurance now must include cancer screening, right? And then working with employers' CSR initiatives, we rolled out mobile screening in the north, and it's Philippine women informing and educating women about the risk of cervical cancer, right? And then also providing screening. And if they were to come back positive, then they are treated through the Philippines public health sector, as well as partly funded by the employer CSRs. Did I answer all of your questions? Okay.
Thank you very much. One more question. So two.
Sorry. Two questions. Does diabetes affect Optascan? And the other one is, can you talk a little bit more about your patient-derived bioprinted constructs?
Sorry, what was the second question again?
You showed that you are also generating patient-derived bioprinted constructs.
Correct.
Can you talk a little bit more about that? What is that? What are you generating there?
Okay. So to answer your first question, we actually detect diabetes as well. So Optascan does detect diabetes. So that's included in the screening. Okay. For your second question, I cannot speak intelligently about that. I can connect you with my scientists to do that. I'm on the commercial side of things, and I take care of providing the economic environment for my team to be able to do what they do.
Good. Dr. Taimi?
The benefit to the community is now they have access to health facilities or health care. Is that right? Is that where the benefits end? What other benefits are the communities where you're getting these samples from seeing?
Okay. So the benefits range based on what is the currently available capabilities and capacities, okay? So in the worst case scenario, such as we are currently, as we are speaking, conducting this medical camp program in northern Uganda in 8 districts. So it's currently happening as we speak, okay? We have done this in DRC. We've done this in Sri Lanka, in the Philippines, right? So one of the issues in these communities is that even if you have the portable health screening and then they are diagnosed positive, where do they go to get the treatment, right? So we got to build the healthcare capacity as well, right? Because we can't just do the screening and overload the system. That doesn't do anybody any good, right? And psychologically, you might as well not know that you're sick, right? Because now you've created a psychological problem for these folks. So that's where we are trying to work with foundations and NGOs, very large global foundations and NGOs, to build the healthcare capacity, okay? Once we build the healthcare capacity through the OncoCare Alliance program, we are able to make the technologies available and accessible so that these communities can train people to then take care of and work in the infrastructure that's being built. And that's where it ends. That's how much we do. Sure, please.
So, but now you sequence their samples.
Mm-hmm.
You sequence their samples,
Right.
through the pipeline.
Yeah.
So then where does that data go? Is that available to Big Pharma? They create VTDs?
Yes.
They now have personalized medicine. Is there some kind of resale at cost to the country where you're getting the samples from or the DNA from? Do you make medication available if you know that there's a diabetes issue in that country? How does that's the benefit that I'm talking about.
Ah, right. Okay, got you. So the actual data is made available on the data marketplace, okay? That, as I said, so this is, call it the quote-unquote Uber model, okay? So the data originator gets 50% of the transaction anytime when that data is used, right? So for example, if a big pharma, we don't give big pharma the data itself. They don't get the raw data, right? They come in through an API, and they're able to get the information they need, okay? Any data that's used in providing that information, the data originators get 50% of that transaction, okay? So that's to answer your first question, what happens to the data, right? And the data sits behind, quote unquote, a firewall. As I had said, we are implementing an independent ethics committee, so there's no financial benefit to them, right? So it's an overseeing committee that we are voluntarily implementing, and it's a multinational committee from the academia, right, the academic sector. If somebody is diagnosed, and you ask me, like, how do they get the medication? So this is where the NGOs and the foundations come. We do the connection, we connect them, and then they implement it. We don't have a hand in that, right? So they'll actually fund the medication and the care. Does that make sense?
So, so basically, your business model is a data selling model, right? And number two, we as clinicians cannot sell patients' data. We are the custodian of data, but we cannot sell the data. So I don't really understand where your business model is coming from.
I propose maybe...
These are vulnerable populations to a large extent. I don't think we should be selling their data.
For the sake of time, I would suggest to continue this conversation at the pause. Yeah, thank you. Now let's... thank you very much, Bren,
thank you,
for the nice presentation and Q&A. I leave the floor to the panel and cancer screening. Thank you very much to the presenters and also to the people in the audience that made questions. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you. While we are setting up, just a humble request for us to stretch to stand up. It's not that we want you to stand up for us, yes, we are not ministers. So just to blood circulation, we are talking about a conference that is health related, so please, let's stand up for blood circulation. So we have everyone here. Perfect. Yes, I will do that. All right. Thank you so much. Let's do the very exciting session. Excellent. I'm aware that we have people who are joining us online from our live streaming options. So if you have just joined us, we are on day 2 of the first Cancer Genomics Conference 2025 under the theme, Harnessing Functional Genomics in Cancer Research, Opportunities for Diagnosis and Treatment. This is session 5. I'm Colin Stanley, the Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Partnerships at the Namibia University of Science and Technology. Besides my research and partnership administration role at the university, I'm an associate professor of computer science with research interest in co-creating technologies with indigenous communities. I will be your moderator for the expert discussion on the role of artificial intelligence, AI, technology in cancer screening and treatment. With me on the stage, I have 5 experts from different disciplines. You might have already listened to them on the prior presentations. We have about 40 minutes. We can always make it shorter for the discussion. And then for the questions and answers, we have 20 minutes. We can also make that one shorter. So I'm delighted to start with a brief introduction of each of the experts on the stadium. And then after that introduction, we will move swiftly to the discussion points, which are only 3. So I've structured for us to have only 3 discussion points. So I will pass my mic over to my left. So please just provide your name and the role that the job that you do, and the country that you are from also. So briefly, thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Harris Onyora is my name. I currently work for Africa CDC as a bioinformatics data scientist. In addition to that, I'm also involved in capacity building, that is training people on genomics, bioinformatics, data science, and so on. I'm originally from Kenya, but based in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Helena Musau. I'm a clinical oncologist. I work in Nairobi, Kenya. I am also an adjunct lecturer at the University of Nairobi, the Radiation Oncology program. And I am in various technical working groups within the Ministry of Health in Kenya, and also sit on various committees in the American Society of Clinical Oncology and the European Society of Medical Oncology. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brent Saminathan, Chairman CEO of Diapol Group and CTO at Oncotech and a co-founder. At Diapol Group, we work with cancer in terms of early detection and capacity building for care, as well as in mental health. We're in the entire value chain from drug development to drug production to therapeutics clinics of psychedelic-derived medications or neuroplastogens.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Rolf Hansen. I head the Cancer Association of Namibia, Palliative Care Namibia, and also lead the National Cancer Registry. I'm a patient advocate. I believe that the rights of the patients and the voice of the patient should always be heard, especially when it comes to the ethics component, because we very often find that there is a vast gap between research, clinicians, the treating doctors, and actually just the patient and their rights.
Thank you. My name is Tammy Sylvester. I am a senior lecturer at Namibia University of Science and Technology within the Department of Clinical Health Sciences. I am also a member of, through NUST, the Access, Benefit and Sharing Group that deals with access to biological samples in Namibia and the benefits that are derived from them. And I am, I guess, a self-proclaimed steward of data in Namibia as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you so much, the experts. And you can see the composition of the experts. Yes, there are people that are from the computing environment, and then you have the medical experts, then you have also people that have really patience about or love for patients and ethical issues. Now, my first discussion point, perhaps it will be more directed to the technologist, but also the other colleagues could jump in. And the point is, how is AI enhancing the accuracy and efficiency in cancer screening and treatment methods? So we've noticed from the presentation starting from LAMEC, there's imaging and now also genomics and many other, what you also have presented on the APIs. Those are application programming interfaces that allows one to use services interoperability between platforms. And he's a bioinformatics. So how is it really that AI is increasing the accuracy? Is it really increasing the accuracy or not? Also in the efficiency in screening, for instance, or treatment.
Thanks so much for the question. I think maybe before I give my responses, I'd just like to give a background on why AI is important. I think the most important thing when it comes to cancer diagnostic or disease detection is actually it's the speed. I want to reiterate what Professor Lamek said. It's speed, scale, and quality of the response. So, and we've seen that next generation sequencing capacity are being embraced by various public health institutions on the continent. The same applies to the hospitals, academic, and so on. And lots of data is being generated. For us to be able to analyze these big data, we need tools such as AI. So with that said, I think for me, I believe that AI confers quite a number of benefits when it comes to cancer screening. I'd like to give maybe a few benefits, then I'll invite my other colleagues to chime in. So the first one will be AI. Some of the AI tools can lead to improved imaging. For example, I know there's a study that was done in Sweden. It was so this study actually divided, there's a group of clinicians that were reviewing the mammograms. So clinician review mammograms versus AI mammogram. So there's a tool called, I think the project was called Masai. So the project found that cancer detection, breast cancer detection was improved by AI tools by up to 29%. So that is one of the benefits of AI tools in cancer screening. The second benefit we've seen it's a study that used a tool called Profound. So it had women who had breast cancer. So there's a tool that is called, there's one of the techniques that is used to screen breast cancer. It's called digital breast tomosynthesis, where the women with breast cancer exposed to some scan. So the scan is able to be, scanning is able to be done on the breast from different angles. Then there's a tool called Profound that is used now to integrate all those images and to come up with a three-dimensional image and be able to tell where the cancer really is. So with this tool, which is called Profound, it found that cancer detection rate were increased by up to 69%. The other benefit will be the AI tools can result in automation of repetitive tasks. So you can have quite a number of data sets. So AI will help the clinician to do pre-screening, and you tell the AI tool, please only flag the cases that are suspicious. So it will let the clinician focus on areas that are important, not necessarily on the negative scans. That's what I can say for now.
So in AI applications, specifically in healthcare, there's interpretive AI and non-interpretive AI. So radiology image increasing effectiveness there is interpretive AI. And Dr. Harris spoke well about that. In non-interpretive use, for example, we've done an implementation in Indonesia where we are using AI to see the diagnosed patients because they have such limited capacity to treat these patients. You look at the patient's diagnosis information across a region, and then the AI figures out who should be prioritized. Because otherwise, you don't have visibility. From one region to another region, you don't have visibility, and whenever they show up at the hospital, then they decide who should be treated, right? So you're able to do priority management, if you will, treatment priority management at scale.
So maybe I can just chime in. In terms of efficiency and AI, when it comes to cancer screening, I'll give an example of a study that was being done in Kenya, where in the western part of Kenya, we were looking at lung cancer. Actually, in the country, the imaging modality that is done a lot is X-rays. So there are so many X-rays done that I could tell you 90% of them don't get reported. You have nurses looking at them, the radiographers looking at them, the clinicians looking at them. So it's up to them to decide what they see at the end of the day. But in this lung cancer study, they would start off with an X-ray, and the AI would be able to tell us whether there was a suspicious lesion or not, and those would be escalated to the radiologist in the study to be able to report, and then of course there's also an external validation of the same. There was a patient that the AI had looked at and had picked a lesion, and the two radiologists, both in the study and for the external validation, did not pick up the lesion. And we had followed up that patient, and a year later, it was now an obvious lesion at the end of the day. So AI, the pickup rate and the positive predictive value was quite high in that study. And it can be useful for us to be able to identify cases where we might need to give extra attention to, or those cases might need to have a second eye look at the particular imaging. So it's created efficiency, and it's actually something that is looking to be rolled out in that county for the patients who get X-rays done. And it's the same for the other studies that have been done. They saw good outcomes in terms of AI. So utilizing it and being able to incorporate it into the healthcare system could be beneficial when we're looking at cancer screening or looking at early detection for our patients. Thank you.
So I concur with your sentiments, colleagues, and I think we're all on the same page that artificial intelligence is non-negotiable going forward. We need it because within our low resource setting, we haven't got the resources, we haven't got the manpower. We need to roll out something that is more efficient. I just sat and I looked at that beautiful lady in her pink outfit. If you just stand up quickly. Can you just stand up? I just want everyone to look at you. So we're going into breast cancer next week, and the whole world goes pink. You know, that the planet goes into this amazing awe of pink, and we're breast cancer, and we're talking about, you know, your health is your wealth, this is your equity, this is your passport to the future. And then we look at Africa, and we look at Namibia, where we have advanced and metastatic disease. Generally, women in Namibia present with stage 3 and 4 breast cancer. And so we're creating this massive hype about breast cancer, but women have nowhere to go. We advocate to do self-breast examinations. Then a woman picks up a lump and they have nowhere to go. Eventually they end up at a local clinic or a district hospital, and there is nothing. There's no sonography, mammography, there's nothing. So it's this huge false illusion of hope that we're creating, and while we are trying to make the world a better place, we're actually just making it far worse. We need to use the tools that we have at our disposal, yes, but we also need to develop a financially bankable model that we can present to the health ministry so that there is investment, the correct investment, practical investment, ethical investment, so that when we roll out AI, there is quality uptake. Because I can promise you, whether you are researchers, clinicians, business-minded entrepreneurs, all of that, you will have the most amazing AI tools in a country. When there's no uptake from society, nothing will go forward. So is there trust in AI? I think that is also the big question. We know that there is need for it because we need a sustainable financial model that can help us, because we can't roll out screening programs all over Africa. We haven't got the manpower, we haven't got the finances, we haven't got the machinery, the equipment. In our own Southern African setting, we haven't got enough mammograms to save our communities for the next 30 years, people. But somewhere along the line, we all need to find middle ground so that we can start saving lives.
Perfect, perfect. Would you like to, because I have a probe just on this discussion, especially Dr. Harris and Dr. Helena, on especially on behavioral patterns. If health patterns, do you think, because if you look at on the other world, I mean, technologies are used to somehow get people addicted to social media. But if you, because they study the pattern and start giving you what you like, is there a possibility to study the patterns, health, especially behavioral health patterns, and then create tools that somehow put interventions? Is that possible? Just a probe question on what you were sharing now. On that point, where you think this is possible. To build trust.
I don't know if I should answer that, but okay. I think that, first coming back to what you were saying, Rolf, about the fact that we don't have enough equipment. I think a lot of times models are built and trained in the global north or in first world settings, and they're sort of dropped in Africa or dropped in certain settings. And then we have challenges on the ground that have not been catered for. Instead of building the model here for our setting and then adapting it to the other country, because a model built in Windhoek will work in Windhoek, it's going to work in Boston. But a model built in Boston will not necessarily work in Windhoek. And I think that that is also what we have been discussing, even within our faculty and across faculties, is how do we come together so that health and informatics work together and we build a model here. We have colleagues from, I think they're from Korea, that have recently come up with an algorithm, and I have to make this disclaimer that I am not a cancer molecular biologist. I am more in infectious diseases, but now through one of my students has started working on hepatitis-induced hepatocarcinoma. So even in that frame, colleagues have come up with something called Plan BDT, I think, and that looks at CT scans, and it is a predictor for the cancer, right? So we have to look at what are the resources that we have available in state, not necessarily the mammograms, not necessarily the MRIs. What are we routinely doing, and how can we extract that information? And I was speaking with Prof earlier about the iris scan, and how many optometrists actually scan the iris, how many scan the retina, and what can we do with that information if informatics and the optometry, comes together. So I think it's about doing that. But then on the matter of trust is we have, across our region, our science literacy is quite low. And we have to address that gap first and foremost. And at NUST, within our department, we actually have a segment on NUST Radio, and we call it the lab line, where we speak in very popular language about health issues, because we're trying to bridge that divide between the general public and the scientists and doctors in the ivory towers. There should be no ivory towers. But when you start thinking about what is the messaging like, I mean, even with our HPV vaccine rollout, I'm on mothers' groups where they are completely confused about what is this HPV vaccine, is my child going to get autism? You know, all of these questions and so much misinformation that is floating around, but we never think about, but what was the messaging prior to that? How are we, who are we catering to with the messaging? And that's where I think we have to build the trust first and foremost. And I know in KZN in South Africa, what they did was they trained pastors on certain health issues, because that is where the community goes to first. So I think we have to look at our neighbor countries, our sister countries, and how have they sort of bridged that divide and do something similar.
Perfect.
I don't think AI trust should be just because it's AI. I don't think that's how it should be looked at, right? I don't think that's how you could build trust, just to say, oh, you must trust AI for the sake of AI. Rather is how you apply it and how it benefits the people. That's where the trust will come from.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I can see we are already touching on the second discussion point, which is what ethical and data privacy issues arise with AI usage and sensitive patient information in the cancer care. I will take a basic example. If you use the cameras in cars, at the beginning people were not trusting them. And after years of seeing that this is really working, then they are comfortable. Where are we when it comes to this technology, especially in cancer care? Are we at a stage where we can trust it from the medical practitioners and from the patients? And other issues that you think we need to iron out?
Right. So this particular topic is a constant debate at my companies as well. And also when we work with academics, the healthcare provider community as well. So the biggest challenge is, for example, I'll give you this example, right? So we are actively now using information from doing screening to build healthcare capacity, right? But to go to, and in this specific case, we are working with the Gates Foundation. To go to the Gates Foundation and say, give this community $20 million to build this facility, they're not going to do it. They want data. They want to see the information, right? So without the information, you cannot get that. But to get the information, we need the data from the ground, right? And if, a lady said you shouldn't be using patient data, well, then how do you build the actual information? The models, right? To get the funding to then build the capacity.
Yeah, and AI relies on data. And in your presentation, one could really see why they say data is the new oil. But then your neighbor next to you, I know in his introduction talk about the ethical issues that are in this profession. Can you perhaps also touch on the ethical issues, especially relating to data or technology usage?
I think it's you.
Me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So, data is money. That's the reality. Big Pharma wants the data because data drives change. That's the reality. And we need the change to get to better healthcare. But the reality on the ground, and again, I'm going to speak from a patient advocacy perspective, is there is not legislation in place to govern, guide, and protect data. If we consider the POPI Act in South Africa, that I think is one of the clearest forms of legislation on privacy in the African context. I know Rwanda is doing a sterling job as well. I just returned from Kenya 2 weeks ago, where I worked very closely there as well. But the reality is it ethical to take the data to build an ivory tower and the patient on the ground does not get access to treatment? Because that is the challenge that we face in the African context. You want my data, but when I need the service, I haven't got access to care. And this is a critical challenge, again, ethical component, financial implications, and the trust. If we are going to start selling data or taking data to build, and I hear what you said, because we need the data to build the AI, to build the capacity, but tell that to, again, Kenya, my driver from the airport into Nairobi, where we were busy with a wonderful patient advocacy meeting, says, you know, sir, I'm forced to pay national health insurance, but I need to feed my children. And if I haven't got the health insurance, I've got access to nothing. But when I need critical care, I need to pay additional to the health insurance. So where's the benefit to the people that we're trying to help? And that is the ethical debate that we always sit with. Who is actually benefiting from all of this?
And I want to jump in there and say that the fundamental question here is the data ownership and sovereignty. Because every country has the sovereign right over its own data. And like the lady at the back pointed out, patient data is not for sale. In Namibia, the Ministry of Health are the custodians of patient data, right? That should not be for sale to any person. And what we have seen here in Africa is historically parachute publishing, we've seen ethics dumping, and we've seen exploitation to the highest level. So now when you say we will now monetize our data, you start playing a very dangerous game. And to further that, to say that the contributors will get 50% of the amount, and I'm just using that as an example, I'm not shooting missiles at you, to say that you're now giving 50% of the cost of the data, so now you've sold the data, and we saw what happened to 23andMe, but you've now sold the data, the person who gives you the data gets 50% of that sale. But we're not talking about the sale of that data. We're talking about what is the potential of the data that you have now sold. So now pharma is able to develop personalized medicines. They're able to tailor their medicine, whether it is on the level that we need or whether it is subpar according to the genetics that they have evaluated, and then sell back that pharmaceutical product to the people whose information helped create that product. I mean, we are then stuck in that cycle of inequity, of the rich getting richer and us poor people here getting poorer. And I have to really underline that equitable access and benefit sharing. The benefit sharing is not what I think it should be, it is what is actually equitable in the system.
Thank you so much. I want to agree with my colleagues, but I think for me the question that we should be asking is not on whether we should share the data or not. The question we should be asking is, what is the minimum amount of data that needs to be shared? If the data is supposed to be shared just for insights, maybe to come up with better predictive model, for me, I don't believe that we need to share data. What we can share and what we can share through a sub-discipline of artificial intelligence, this is called swarm learning or swarm intelligence. You don't need to share the data. Let's say like we are seated here, 5 of us. I have my data set. I have my own algorithm or insight based on 50 data sets. She has a model based on 100 data sets, you 200. So I do my prediction. I come up with my own insight. You come up with your own insight. Then it is these insights that we need to share. The insight will then be optimized because the data it's going to be based on a larger data set. Then the insight can be cascaded back to us. Thank you.
I want to raise the question of informed consent and patient autonomy when we're talking about all this data, because it goes back to the patients at the end of the day. When I'm sitting with a patient and I'm telling them you need maybe a sample or you need to join this trial or we'll take your imaging and data is analyzed and is part of deep learning or machine learning, are they able to understand that? Are they able to give consent for that at the end of the day, for us to be able to say that we got informed consent and that their data was part of this swarm learning that we're talking about. Case in point, when we look at the HeLa cells, Henrietta Lacks, she didn't give consent for those cells to be immortalized, but they have been beneficial to the human race to be able to help us understand things, including, the cell cycle etc. and for, diseases and drugs. But they did not understand that, and her family sued. And the patients that we are also dealing with now, when we ask for consent to be able to get this data, are they able to understand? So are we actually getting informed consent? I don't think I can answer that.
Mr. Brand, if you want to touch anything, reflection on what was discussed at this point, anything, then we move to the last one.
Sure. So actually, concur with Dr. Harris here. It's not the data, it's how you give that information, right? And this is something we are very cautious about. So we're not dumping data to any other requests. They're coming through an application programmable interface or an API to get the insight they need, right? On the topic of informed consent, yes, that is a challenge, right? Because there's a huge, let's say, education gap, right? So that's right. And so how do you overcome that? I don't have the answer for that.
Perfect. We are here for open questions for us to impact on research. But Dr. Elena, you want to come back? All right. All right,
So
thanks.
then I had another question regarding unauthorized access. Of course, it's data, and then we're looking at data security. How do we ensure that there's no unauthorized access through the dark web? Something I don't even understand. Because the data has, there's levels to the data for sure, but when we get down to the basics, there's patient-level data that has been anonymized. If they can be able to access that, then this puts also our patients at risk. So how do we ensure unauthorized access when we're dealing with this data?
Perfect. I would like to twist it around and pose that question to the audience. And then, but if you want to comment on it, it's perfect. If you want to comment on this, on that point that she...
Just another question.
You also another question number 2 to the audience.
Can I?
Yes, please.
So my other question is about the use of AI tools. Let's say, like, if I'm a cancer patient, I think there's some issues that needs to be addressed. For example, who is going to be responsible in the event that the insight that is maybe going to be used for my treatment goes wrong? Maybe the AI tool does misdiagnosis. Who is going to be responsible? Is it the clinician, the hospital, the person who came up with that model? Who is going to be sued? Who is going to bear all those costs? And when is the timeline for all this to be addressed? Thanks.
Perfect. Very good.
Yeah,
2 questions to the audience. I want to pause here so that we can proceed to the last one. 2 brave audience who wants. Thank you.
Yeah, so with our genomic data, actually we don't have it on the cloud. So there are many countries out there that have really, really good models. So I think going and speaking to them and how they protect data, UK is one, Australia is one. So our data has to be stored in our HPC, which is run by the government. Our Namibian, South African colleagues, Kenyan colleagues enter it through an email address that they get given. So they are able to enter actually the Australian HPC where the data is stored. It's actually very expensive to move data around. That's the most expensive cost we have, is moving data. So you don't want to move it, but if you move it once. So there are some really, really good guidelines. I also suggest that you tier your data. You have different levels of access, and never put your clinical data with your genomic data, for example. And there are very good guidelines around how those are done. I think this is really an area working with the countries that have been working for many years in this space is really critical. And then I also suggest New Zealand, the Maori group, some New Zealand indigenous populations of New Zealand, have established really beautiful guidelines for Maori genomic data. And it's worthwhile getting a hand on their booklet, because it's not exactly the same, but they have some really cool ideas. And in fact, New Zealand was far ahead of Australia in establishing indigenous-specific guidelines. Yeah, so
Perfect.
there's some good things out there.
One last more. I'll just take one.
Thank you so much, everybody. My name is Dr. Lisa Mertens. For those who have not met me, I'm working for a large molecular diagnostics lab in Germany, headquartered in Germany, but we're active in all parts of the world. We're CAP and CLIA accredited, which means we have to operate by the highest ethical and medical principles that are in practice out there. And I would like to quickly, briefly just share some pointers on how we go about preventing access from the outside. Because basically that is a commitment where if you put a data security plan into action, it's not done and you can walk away. It's something you very actively have to protect and keep adding layers. So for example, a big one is you have to limit the access to the building where you store the data. And that means like even if you work in that building, you will not have access to all the different places. And it's also a major offense to lose your door access card. You have to immediately report that, for example. Then we're also trained to report strangers that are in the building, like all these kind of things. And we're reminded on a monthly basis to just make sure to really alert everybody if, in case there's an email, to not click on the link, to prevent the hacking, which could occur in person, but it could also occur digitally. Yeah. So what we do in order to really make it as difficult as possible for third parties to access very sensitive patient data is to never upload it to the cloud and to only allow the people that are directly working with that particular patient's case access to their medical history, to their report, and we also send the reports to the doctors only via an encrypted platform. And sometimes they're lazy and they say, oh, can't you just email it to me? And we say, no. Everybody can capture that email, so it has to go via a protected platform. Okay. And to close on a funny note, our IT department also likes to keep us busy. So sometimes they send us fake emails, like they're trying to phish us. They're like, you're gonna lose all your vacation days if you don't click here. And then we get in a lot of trouble, and at the next monthly meeting, where they tell us how many people fell for that trap. So if you're thinking about data security, it's a commitment that never ends, and it's something you always have to be prepared for and put multiple layers in place.
Thank you so much.
Because I think there's nothing more valuable than very sensitive genetic medical information about the patients that you're looking after.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing those insights. My senior have raised a hand, and I have to give that exception. Prof, please, quickly. Yes.
AI is a tool making our work easier and more efficient and accurate. It doesn't take away the responsibility of clinical decision making from the healthcare provider. Yeah. And we must bear that in mind, that the relationship between AI and the patient doesn't exist. The relationship exists between the clinician and the patient. That's my position. AI is a tool for making our work easier.
Yeah, like any other tool.
And AI can also be seen by the patient as an advanced plagiarism in a way, because if you say chip chat, is using secondary data to make certain predictions and information, generate information. It's not a primary source of information. It's a secondary source of information. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The last point, you can answer it in our conclusion. We have seen there are challenges. I mean, when it comes to infrastructure, and it's very expensive, comes to the skills, you need the right skills. The skills in terms of training that often we run away from it, the core science. We need somehow strategies on how we can work together to put resources for us to have this, what we wish for. What would be your thought on how we can go about overcoming that challenge? We can start, and then we just do a round for everyone.
It's a tough question, but I'll try my best to answer. answer this. It's good to identify the barriers to implementation or adoption of AI tools, but let me just say this one study that was, I want to give a study first, then I come back to answering that question. There's this country on the continent which I think like 10 years ago, it had high levels of or prevalence of open defecation practice. In some provinces, it was reaching as high as 100%. So the people that were doing that study, they built toilets, latrines for those people so that they could stop open defecation practice. Years later, they went back, but still the people were defecating outside. So what I want to say is that in as much as we identify the barriers, from our side, we want the patients to be able to agree and start using the AI tools. But we can come up with so many tools, but the patient might not end up using those tools. So our approaches must be community-centered. Let us engage the patient. Let them know the benefits of utilizing these AI tools. In terms of workforce, I know when you talk about workforce, we're talking about people that maybe can interpret the data that is coming from the AI tools. Yeah. But at the same time, I want to emphasize that we should stop this helicopter science where people come on the continent, they collect samples, they go elsewhere. People say they need data from Africa, but I'm not sure whether that can happen if we let's say like bold Africans, we go maybe to another continent and say, we need data so that we can also increase the diversity of the data set that we have. Let us build our own homegrown solution. If there are any AI tools or models out there, let us domesticate them. Let us train people that can come up with our own models. Thank you.
I think one of the challenges that we've mentioned over and over this afternoon has been the infrastructure. We don't have electricity, we don't have internet access, computers or AI-enabled, equipment is not readily available. But I think a way we can be able to address that is to have gradual infrastructure development such that we don't have to get there at once. We don't have to get there at a go, but if we can slowly just increase our capacity, lay the groundwork for us to be able to have AI-enabled clinics at the end of the day, or a healthcare system that can also work with AI well, or integrate AI, that could go well to be able to address the challenges that we're seeing in terms of AI and screening, cancer screening. Thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, infrastructure capacity is a challenge, and going back to data security and data sovereignty as well. So I think the time has come where countries need to start treating data centers like how they treat power plants and water supply and internet access. So I think countries need to invest in their own data centers.
So I think at the end of the day, it's desired outcome, and that is a healthier community, a healthier public, a healthier nation. And in order to achieve that, the Ministry of Health and Social Services, as the custodian of healthcare, need partners. Public-private partnerships are the only way that we can drive this. And when we speak about the private partners component, this means telecommunications departments, yes. Solar energy partners who are interested in innovative approaches. They want to invest, they want to look good, yeah, as quality contributors to our society. So private-public partnerships are, in my opinion, the cornerstone of a healthy ecosystem. We cannot drive innovation without having the foundation laid right. We cannot drive innovation, AI, a healthier economy without having electricity, without having access to telecommunication services. And I think walking out of this, what we need to do as Namibia, as Southern Africa, and as a continent, is we need to go and identify who are the stakeholders that can make this a reality for us. Otherwise, like Prof. Lamek has said, next year we're going to come here and we're going to have this exact same debate. Exactly. By next year, we want to have our partners who are going to help us mobilize and get to what we want to achieve. We want them in the room with us.
Perfect. Dr. Sylvester?
Thank you. And now I have to be short because my
Very
boss
short,
is saying.
please.
Okay. I think that the key here is co-creation. because we have to go and speak with the communities, because that's the only way that we are going to solve the issues that we see. And then with that tiered approach, like we have the clinics and then we go to secondary and tertiary, we have to have that same kind of thought around what kind of AI infrastructure do we want in certain settings. But I do very much agree with my colleague, Dr. Harris, about the fact that we need to stop this parachute publishing. Yeah. We need to realize how much power we have with data. If we are approached and they say, we cannot help you if we don't get your data, we get access to you, we have open access to your data, then so be it. How is a pharma company going to develop anything that is marketable without the individuals who have the pathogens or have the DNA? And I want just to encourage everyone to go and read up about the policies that are in your own home countries, which regulate the movement of biological and genetic resources. In Namibia, we do have a policy, and we have an act, actually, which covers access to biological or genetic resources in situ, and parts of those resources, their derivatives, and genetic information or gene sequences. Sequencing and isolating microbes, even microbes from the environmental samples, animal tissues, all of that is within the scope of that act. So that's human and environmental and animal, one health approach. The Act requires permits for export, for use, or prospecting, and covers associated traditional knowledge and benefit sharing obligations where relevant. Failure to obtain the necessary permits can result in criminal penalties, fines, and orders to remediate the damage. And I'm sure a lot of other countries on the continent, I know that the global north countries have very strict regulations on that. So I implore everyone to consider those as they venture on in their research journeys.
Perfect. I would like to thank my panelists. Thank you so much for your expertise and taking time to discuss these critical points, and that allows us to look way forward. And I like the last remarks. It's already putting us in the right direction. I would like to make one announcement and allow only one question if there is any other question to the panelist. One question announcement is that please tomorrow you must be here at 7:30. The reason is we know that some of you will come late. So that we can start promptly at 8 so that you have time to enjoy the beautiful city of Windhoek. I saw a hand up there. Yes.
One question for the road, Mr. Bren. I'm sorry, I know you received already about 5 questions. This is the last one from an anatomical pathologist view. So given that histology, it remains the gold standard in us to diagnose our slides, with the machine of the AI Optascan, how do you see it complementing pathology without replacing us as anatomical pathologists? I'm sorry if I put you on the spot.
So our technology is intended for mass population screening. And when an individual is found to be positive, they will go through functional diagnostics before they can get into before a treatment plan can be created. So we are not displacing that. If anything, we'll be driving more traffic to it based on the trend.
Are you answered?
I think the most important thing is that AI will never displace, like Prof said. The two must work hand in hand, but the human factor can never truly be taken out. It must help in efficiency. And that is something that I think all of us need to process still. Efficiency, to screen more, to help more. But human perfection, and our imperfections too, it will always be needed. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Perfect. I'll now hand over to the moderator. Thank
you very much. Just before closing, I would like to call on stage Uvatera Maori Ungirire, and for a round of applause for him, for all the work he has been doing. And he will also share some announcements with us.
No, thank you. No, thank you to the moderator and the panelists, and to everyone who's here. And I just have some last announcements before we call it a day. Yeah, no, so I'll start off with, so after we're done here, we can go to tea. You can have some tea and some snacks outside. And then on top of that, if you, because we had some technical issues during the presentations, by the 5-minute presentations, they have their posters there in one of the rooms there just across the foyer. So you can just go have a look there. And then on top of that, also don't forget to pass by the exhibition stands. And for those who are traveling to Protea Hotel and to Nast Hotel School, the bus will be here at 5 o'clock. But otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Yeah. Thank you. Oh yeah, 7:30. Yeah.
Thank you very much.